and thank you so much. I'm honored and privileged to be here today.
Are you on there?
And just to kind of give you a short background of where I came from, I graduated from Temple University in Philadelphia. I was a two-sport athlete there. Actually, as my son will tell you, back in the olden days when I played, our scholarships were actually split. So half of my scholarship was in field hockey and the other half was in lacrosse. I think that was all done so we wouldn't quit one or the other. So we were stuck for those 4 years. I graduated with a degree in exercise physiology and kinesiology. Wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do, as most college graduates are. So I took a position as a grad assistant at the University of Maryland. And then basically learned a lot there under the tutelage of two great head coaches, and then moved on to the University of Delaware, where I was a full-time field hockey and lacrosse assistant coach. But the caveat to that was, and I didn't really read the fine print, was I had to be an instructor in the phys ed department. Now, I had no experience in teaching whatsoever. Both of my parents are teachers, so I thought, oh, this is going to be easy. I'm going to teach tennis, which I played competitively when I was younger, racquetball, and badminton. Well, how hard can that be? Well, I have all the most respect for professors and teachers after spending a semester trying to teach those really basic classes. I was terrible. I mean, I have to be honest. Thank goodness the supervisor never came to watch one of my classes, or I would have been fired on the spot. I had no concept of any kind of plan, nothing. So I had to move on from that position. That was not for me. I knew that right away. So I went back to the University of Maryland as a full-time assistant coach just for lacrosse, won a national championship, and then was offered the opportunity to go to Yale University. And I was there for 14 years. So being at Yale, I think really gave me an appreciation of the academic side of being a student athlete. At Yale, we didn't have any opportunities within our athletic department for academics. We provided no support. It was their philosophy that if you're a student athlete and you want to pursue an extracurricular activity, that you were smart enough to do it without any help. And I'll never forget, we were in the second round of the NCAA tournament, and it was during the exam period, and we were leaving for Loyola. We were supposed to leave on Friday. On Thursday, I had 6 players at practice. On Friday, we had a morning practice. I had to send 2 of my players home, my goalie and my best defender, because they had spent 3 days in the architecture studio and had not slept. So it was just a very different experience, obviously. But I loved Yale. I mean, I loved being surrounded by the best of the best. They were the best and the brightest, and they were engaging, and they were everything you could ask for. But what I kind of missed was the ability to compete at the national level. And while we were successful, those opportunities weren't really afforded us all that often. So when this job came available, obviously I jumped in with both feet because, having done some research, the academic reputation of the university was tremendous, along with the athletic program. So it was, as I say, the best of both worlds. So from there, when Jeremy was kind enough to offer me the position, obviously I took it immediately. And then the first order of business was recruiting. Okay, and as was said, we didn't have a program. We had nothing. So the first thing we had to do was hit the road recruiting. And unlike softball or soccer and maybe a little bit of volleyball, the majority of our recruits come from the Mid-Atlantic and the Northeast region. They're not going to come from the state of Florida. And what I thought was very interesting was that the academic reputation of Florida didn't really exist in that area, which is interesting to me because within the state and within the South, it's really well known. Up north, I mean, kids, you'd say, okay, I'm from the University of Florida. Oh, you have that great football and basketball program. Well, yeah, okay, we have that, but you should see how many, national merit scholarships, scholars we have here. And we're second in the country in that. Did you know that? Well, No, but you have a heck of a football team. Yeah, okay. So, we kind of had to basically, within a short amount of time, inundate these families and these recruits with literature, academic literature. So we called admissions, we called the colleges within the university and had them send us whatever information they had so that we could send this information out to our student athletes and our recruits to get them to actually come onto our campus. And we're really successful. Once people did their homework and went on the website and recognized what a tremendous academic reputation Florida had, because it's an easy sell once we get them here. But we were competing against North Carolina and Duke and Virginia. So we needed to really make sure that these families were invested academically as well. So we get them onto campus, and then in front of you, I actually have some recruits today and tomorrow. And basically, this is an itinerary of what we do when we finally get these recruits onto campus. So I don't know if you have any questions on, the part building up to this just yet, or good?
Let me ask you, so what's your homework in terms of how do you decide who you're going to recruit? I assume, obviously, their athletic skill is evident in their, high school color.
Right.
What else do you look at when you go?
Well, we do look at their academics a lot because what I found, and I don't know if it's just my my experience at Yale, but I found that there's a direct correlation between success in the classroom and success on the athletic field. So typically, those student athletes that we're looking at are basically amazing lacrosse players, but also are very successful in the classroom. Because we want that success to go both ways. We want them to be successful in the classroom. We also want them to be successful on the athletic field. So, we will go to tournaments and identify sort of the athletes we're looking for to recruit, and then we go back and we will get their transcripts. We'll talk to their teachers, their guidance counselors, and make sure that we're doing a good background check academically on them. Yes.
These are all 2017s.
They are.
Freshmen.
And
you bring in, we asked some of the coaches in the last couple weeks, how early do you go? Would there
do you
be
know how
2018s?
old 2017s are?
14, 15.
They are 14 and 15.
Oh, that's good.
Yes. Yes.
Would
we
you
were
go
just
any
talking
younger
about
than-
that on the way in
I guess
here.
that- Would you have a 2018 on an unofficial visit?
No, we have not had a 2018 on a visit unless it's a sister of someone else that we've brought in. It's a really delicate balance right now in recruiting these younger, these younger players. It's one of those situations where, and I know that I've talked to Becky Burley on a number of occasions about, slowing the process down. These are 14-year-old, girls, and they are making college decisions. And I actually, just got a commitment last night from a 2017. And, it's kind of one of those things where I feel like if you don't get on the bus, you're going to get left behind because they're going to go somewhere else. They're committed to making that decision. The family's committed. They feel like they've done their visits. They've investigated the schools, and so.
In addition to everything else, facilities have got to be great selling now.
Without a doubt. I mean, when we were sitting down and planning the facility, Jeremy said, well, it's not going to be the Taj Mahal of lacrosse facilities. It is by far the Taj Mahal of lacrosse facilities. It is by far. And I think what was unique in building the program was that, we had nothing. We had no team, we had no facilities, we had nothing to show our our potential student athletes. Really all we had was Jeremy and Linda. And kind of what more can I mean, there it is. I need to say no more. Really.
No, you did it, just that.
Yeah, and I think it was, we kind of, they did a great job of telling these recruits and their parents that they're going to matter. They're going to matter what they do in the classroom. You know, they're gonna matter what they do on the athletic field. We're gonna know their name. And we're just not gonna know their name, but the professors are gonna know their names. The people in the publics are gonna know their name. And really just building upon that dream of, you know, you're gonna be something, you're gonna mean something here at this university. And, you know, our first group of seniors just graduated, and I can tell you that I've had numerous conversations with the parents and those recent graduates, and the first thing that they say is that everything that you promised, you delivered upon. And I don't think you can ask for anything else, so.
They're not for everyone, parents. We get letters, we do not get letters, that first group of people, you know, because like Amanda said, we had nothing except our word. And, you know, I think the success of soccer and softball, two teams that we added, and we were showing, you know, we had these sports and we built these facilities, and you gotta trust us, we would do the same thing here. But, the number of comments we got from parents, and I got a nice letter, a couple of cards from the seniors just saying, hey, thank you for what you did for us here. I'll tell you a great story. When we first hired Mandy, we did an interview on the phone. She was up in Yale in this lacrosse magazine out of Baltimore. It was going to be a new program, you know, coach and everything. And so the guy asked me, you know, so now you guys are going to build a stadium and you'll have full scholarships. And I said, well, no, we're not going to have any scholarships at all. So her end of the phone got really quiet. I'm just playing.
Yeah, my
She already agreed to take a job.
My heart made a little AFib there. I was like, oh yeah. So, yes.
Having talked with Becky in the past, apparently students who commit in soccer are very loyal. Is that true also for lacrosse?
Yes. Yes, it is. It is for the most part. The only flip that we have encountered was a young lady whose family wanted her to pursue a more Christian school, so she's heading to Liberty. But they typically hold true to their word. This is really the first year that we are recruiting ninth graders. So invite me back in 4 years and I'll let you know.
Maybe I think it's important also that you talk about how just once the commitment happens, that doesn't end the recruiting of that particular kid.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, these kids are committing when they're 14 years old. So, you know, you are constantly in contact, and, you know, Jamie will tell you the rules are, you know, it's tough to stay in contact with them. But without a doubt, I mean, you have to continue to make an effort to, you know, to continue to be a part of their lives. I mean, because really that's the big thing, is just being, you know, in their lives, making sure that they are, you know, still excited about the University of Florida 4 years after they commit. So absolutely.
You're going to need to continue on what you're going to say, otherwise we will not let you get off the question. We'll go back to question and answer.
Absolutely. Well, the first page that I have is basically just the itinerary of what we do with our student athletes once they get onto campus. And, you know, as you can see, they're meeting with a nutritionist and our strength and conditioning coach. And probably the most crucial and critical person on this list is Caleb, and he is our academic advisor. And obviously, I'm very partial. I think he is the best in that department and that office. Caleb is so incredibly dedicated. And the second page is basically he meets with every single one of our recruits, every single one. And that can be up to 60 recruits per year, if not more. So he's meeting with them on the weekends, he's meeting with them in the evenings, he's meeting with them during the day. You know, and this is basically what he goes over in his kind of spiel to our recruits and their families. And I know that I read some of the minutes, so I think there's a lot of the stuff that on here that you've already talked about and know about. So if there's anything on here, and Dr. Caradani is here as well, and he might know probably as much about it as as everybody. So if there's anything on here, you know, Caleb actually priority registration. These are all huge things for parents. They are sending their child, a 2-hour plane ride away. So they want to make sure that they are in good hands, and in good hands across the board. Not only medically, but certainly academically, because the last thing they want is their child to have some sort of academic troubles. So Caleb is incredibly efficient in going through all of the things that we do to make sure that our student athletes are getting the best experience possible academically. So this is a huge amount of things that Caleb does, but he does it with a smile on his face and a passion for the University of Florida and the academic side. So just really kind of blessed to have somebody like Caleb on our staff, because he is just as important as my 2 assistants, as anybody else on our staff, if not more.
Let me give you a real experience and ask you how it worked. When my daughter was recruited to soccer, not here, I went with her on a visit, and we were talking to coach. And my daughter said to the coach, I really will be interested in the honors program. The coach said, you're not going to have time for it. She said, but that would be it. I said, no, that just doesn't fit in with playing soccer. Well, we left.
Yeah. For good, huh? Never look back.
When you have a student, and I'm sure you have,
Yes.
that come on campus and have academic expectations and skills, can you integrate those with the demands of practice and playing and that?
Yes, absolutely. Actually, we build our practice around their academic schedules, and that's for the fall and the spring. So right now we have a fifth-year senior who has a business class. It goes from 2:30 to 4:30 on Wednesdays. Normal practice time is typically 3:30 on Wednesdays. We're backed up until 4:30, 4:45 to allow them to get there. So we are always making adjustments to our practices to accommodate all of our student athletes' academic requirements. And what I say to someone who would be sort of in your daughter's situation is that the opportunity is there. There's no professional women's lacrosse after college. So you need to make the most of your opportunities academically while you're here. So absolutely, we would encourage her to take whatever classes that that she would want to take and fully engage in that. And that would include if there's we have a pre-med student who is in a rotation right now, and it takes her a little while. She has an electric bike. She doesn't have a scooter, so it takes her a little while to get from where she is to practice. But we build that time in because that's important to her. And we have an opportunity fund where we're helping her pay for some MCAT studies. So they're all things that we have available to our student athletes that are that it just doesn't happen other places. So.
Cal, you had a question.
I was wondering what challenges your student athletes have relative to academics here. What are some of the issues that come up?
I think the challenges when they come here as freshmen is that it possibly is the first time they've ever been away from their parents, a distance. So we run into a little bit of homesickness. So you'll get parents calling like, oh, well, Sally called and she's a little homesick and I can't get down there. What can you do? Well, we have lots of opportunities to help her with her homesickness. I think just kind of the dorm life, like adjusting to having roommates because, they're not used to having to share things. So, that whole aspect of, but, ultimately, I feel like the Office of Student Life does such a phenomenal job of bringing our student athletes in a week early for orientation so they get them acclimated to the University of Florida in all aspects of what they're gonna encounter throughout their career here. So I think that's really beneficial. It really helps us in regards to, making sure we don't encounter that many issues.
Just so you know, it's not just lacrosse players who don't know share.
I'm an only child, so I am all about me.
Once a year, they bring all the new rules for housing to me to go through, and they invent new things all the time. And one of the new rules this year was that you can only have one refrigerator. And I said, per room? And they said, no, per student. And I saw that two-person room, you had 2 refrigerators. And they said, yeah. And I said, we had to make a rule about that? They said, yeah, somebody was trying to bring a freezer in. And I'm like, I said, well, is it, what if we had a rule that you have to have one refrigerator and you share like people used to do? And they said, hey, there's no share. There's no share. Our students don't share. It's just a millennial thing. And beyond.
I'm sure it was a lacrosse player that wanted to bring a freezer, that probably had some other things they wanted to bring. Yes, exactly. Interesting when you were talking about your daughter, I have a senior in high school, and we just went through the recruiting process, hence all these gray hairs. They are all, everybody says, oh, we've been in coaching for 25 years. I can understand those gray hairs. No, it's my senior in high school, my daughter. So we go through the recruiting process. We go to, she had wanted to go to Princeton since she's been this big. Fly up there, spend all this money, stay, 3 nights in a hotel. We're going to make this work. 5 minutes into the campus tour, she looks at me, she goes, I don't really like this place. Your jaw drops. All you think is like, okay, in your head, you're like, okay, $400 for flights, $300 for a hotel. You gotta be kidding me, Madison. No, don't think I like it. This was your dream school. You've told me since you've been this tall, Princeton's the answer. That's where you, nope, don't like it. I'm like, holy bananas. Okay. So once I take my deep breath and I'm walking through the tour, I kind of pull it together and I'm like, okay, well, what else do you think? She's like, I think Stanford might be a good option. Really? Oh, okay. So out to Stanford we go because I am a, good mother. I'm really good mother, but good mother. Fly her out to Stanford. 5 minutes on the campus. Yeah, I can see myself here. Meet with the coach. Goes, absolutely. So she's going to Stanford next fall. But I mean, I've been through it, and yes, it is stressful. So again.
Should have said why.
No, she's already committed. Her word is good. She signed that national letter of intent. There is no flipping.
But she also did that tour when she was a reasonable age to make an assessment about college versus
Yes.
when you don't have all your teeth.
It was this fall, so yes, she did.
So do you also recruit older students?
We do. I think recruiting is an evolving process. I mean, there's no doubt that kids you're going to miss that are 14 years old that are going to develop into pretty spectacular players. So absolutely, it's an evolving process. One that you just can't say, okay, I'm done my 2016 class. I'm not going to look again because those opportunities are out there for student athletes to become better. So yeah, it is. It's constant.
Let me ask you, you only have one graduating class, but it's one of the things that we sometimes talk about and we worry about the student athlete academic life is really something that's called major clumping, that is all athletes migrating to a particular major for whatever reason. Do you find that in your lacrosse?
No, I feel like we're pretty diverse in our majors, without a doubt. So no, I don't find that.
Good.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a good answer.
Yeah. We have a very diverse across the board major selections.
Other questions? I'm afraid we're going to have to let you go. I think
You're fired, or no, that does not count. Maybe you can kindly leave, but not you're fired. That's not.
But there are 2
Donald Trump.
opportunities to see Mandy's team in action this week.
Yes, we play Thursday evening against James Madison. There will be fireworks on the game, so that's pretty spectacular, amazing. And then on Sunday, we play the University of Cincinnati, so.
So when do you get to play Chapel Hill again?
We need a redo, a do-over. And if we could have those, a do-over would be fantastic. We like to have a do-over, so maybe in the tournament, NCAA tournament, we'll look to
Yeah.
redeem ourselves. Yeah, absolutely, so.
All right.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank
I
you.
really appreciate it. It was
Yeah.
wonderful, and I hope you're feeling better.